Our film starts in Los Angeles with a guy looking over the town, talking about how he can't believe the happenings of the past few days and begins telling the story. Back at his house, he opens up a credit card statement and finds out that his wife made a charge for over 12 grand at a hotel. He calls the hotel, who tells him he's been staying there a lot. Realizing he's being cheated on, he contemplates suicide but fails at every attempt. He then sees an infomercial for being a vampire, so he calls the number given. While he waits, he fantasizes about being a vampire and killing his wife and her lover. He sees his wife off, but after a fantasy of villagers coming to kill him, he begins to change his mind. That is, until he sees that the vampire who sent to turn him is a hot lady in lingerie named Lilith. After a joke about his wife getting around so much even a random vampire he just met knows about it, they get down to business. He tells her he wants to spend forever with her, and she proceeds to bite him.
I hope that it was as good for you as it was for me.
He then has a funeral where his wife finds out he's been let out of the will and OJ's housemate leaves her behind. That's when there's a snag in the plan where, due to not being any money to pay for the burial, she agrees to have him cremated. After the credits, we find out that the people running the funeral parlor have a side business where they sell bodies to a cult that includes Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell, who then along with his cohort kill the people running the funeral home, resulting in the ashes of our protagonist Richard falling off a rack and him resurrecting. Richard then looks up Kato's address, whose name is Jonathan here, then confronts him. Jonathan explains that Janet left him for some rich tech guy, and Richard proceeds to feed on him. Richard then goes to a friend of his, who explains to him that 5 years has passed, and in that time there was a secret vampire war, and most of the vampires have been wiped out as Richard is trying to find the woman who turned him. The friend tells him to head to a club to find a guy named Boris, which he does. There he ends up talking to a guy about a secret part of the club where he's taken. There he sees they're shooting a snuff film where a guy is killed by a female vampire. They try to capture Richard, but he ends up fighting everyone off. Richard escapes out the back door where a woman in a white van picks him up and tells him that he has to be blindfolded to take him where they're going. He's told that everyone at the place they end up at are half-breed vampires like him. Back at the club, we get an introduction to who will be playing the terrible, aggressive, for no reason cops in the film. They show their captain a copy of the tape of Richard killing everyone, and we get conflict between the regular police and the head of a special vampire hunting unit. Back at the vampire sanctuary, Richard gets a tour and meets the vampire version of Blanche from the Golden Girls, who hits on him hard. We also learn the girl who saved him, whose name is Mary, is a virgin after she explains her daughter Lizzie is adopted. Hashtag foreshadowing, as that's a weird random fact to give someone you just met. Back at the police station, we also find out the new cop is a Mormon, which makes stereotypical aggressive for no reason cop even more aggressive. We are then shown a vampire meeting from the house that's in all the vampire softcore films, claiming that they're going to go on a feeding frenzy. Back with the vampire hunter's super cop Hardcastle, we get a flashback of his family and him telling them he loves them. He then gets home and finds them dead on the ground. They then wake up as vampires and he's forced to kill them. This is where we find out his wife is responsible for the scar on his face. He then sends the hunter group out. Back with Richard, he gets the recap of how the government wants all vampires dead and the half-breeds stay half-breeds by using a blood patch. Just as we get all in the feels of how great and family-oriented these people are, the vampire hunters raid their facility. During the raid, the evil vampires, we know because they're wearing black and a lot of leather, come in and this battle royal goes on for a while. I will say that the number of ex-American gladiators in this is very impressive, and the director clearly made sure they interacted with each other. Eventually, we get a reunion between Richard and Lilith, where we find out Lilith is one of the evil vampires, and then there is friction between Lilith and the other evil ones over her wanting to save Richard. Back at the softcore house, the evil vamps report to their master Vlad that they failed. They went there to get a sacrifice, and then we learn of a prophecy, and apparently Richard is the chosen one. The master tells Lilith to bring him to their side, or he dies. Lilith goes to Richard and tells him the entire plan. We then find out they need to sacrifice Mary, the virgin, to create eternal darkness. After some rated PG-13 sex scenes that is mostly biting and fangs, Lilith emerges and it's revealed she's turned on the evil vamps. She helps Richard escape, but instead of leaving, stays behind to try to talk her sister into turning with her. Back with the original cops, who have had no real purpose the entire film until now, we find out that Mary is the main cop's daughter. They head into the vampire's hideout, which they learn about from a vampire drug addict they paid off, and confront Richard. A wounded Hardcastle tases them, and eventually they all stop attacking each other long enough to get the backstory that they're all on the same side and have to find Mary to prevent the whole vampire Armageddon thing. We then see that Mary and the little girl are hiding in a dumpster. Celeste, the horny old lady, then tells her she'll take them to safety, but instead sells them out to the evil vampires, who she says promise to turn her into a full vampire, but instead they kill her as soon as they get Mary. Back with the evil vampires, they find the Mormon cop who just happens to also be a virgin, negating the need for Mary. Just before they sacrifice him, Rieger confronts them. He successfully takes out the main vampire thug and frees his partner while Richard frees Lilith. As Rieger is going through the house, he's reunited with his daughter and is introduced to her adopted daughter / his new granddaughter. Finally, Richard and Lilith confront the master Vlad and Lilith's sister Lexa. Vlad becomes a monster thing and attacks Richard, but before he can take out Richard, Rieger takes out the large stained glass window that I will never understand why vampires have in their home, burning him in the sunlight. Lexa, seeing it, attempts to throw a stake at Richard, but Lilith jumps in front of him, resulting in her getting impaled and dying in Richard's arms. Richard then vows to hunt vampires down as Lexa gets away. The last thing we see is Lexa at a bar, having started creating a new vampire army with the guy who was sleeping with Richard's wife and the vampire hunter Hardcastle. Thanks for watching. If you like these recaps, please leave a like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to know every time I update. There is now an option to be a channel member where you'll get access to exclusive recaps from late night vampire catalogs like Showtime, Cinemax After Dark, USA Up All Night, and much more. If you want to help my channel grow, please check out my Patreon, where members can get exclusive content that can't be uploaded on YouTube, along with download options. Link is in the description.